welcome to Anything But Ordinary with Spooky and Raven. Tonight's topic, Poltergeist Cases, the Surrency and Amherst families. I am your host, Spooky, along with your other host, the awesome Miss Raven.
Hey.
Hey. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing a little bit better. I'm sick. I have that strep and stuff, so hopefully I'll be able to make it through the whole show. You know what I mean?
Well, I certainly hope so.
Yeah. Tonight's topic, the poltergeist stuff, is one of those ones which, when we started really looking into this, both you and I, when we were talking, we found several cases and events that have occurred that we actually want to talk about. And
definitely. Sorry.
Oh, okay. And since this is only we can only really tend to pick 2 per show, you know what I mean? So.
Oh yeah. Tonight's topic will be another one that will be a reoccurring show topic that we do.
Yeah, totally. We're gonna end up.
And
it's gonna be a multiple one because there's just so many cases that we found that we want to talk about.
I know it was really hard to choose, I thought. And to let you guys know, we may go past our typical 2-hour live show because there is a lot to talk about when it comes to the Surrency. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Yeah. And the Amherst events.
Right. We'll try our best anyway, because we try to stay in 2-hour range, but when we get to talking, sometimes it just goes forever with some of these topics and stuff. But when it comes to people's opinions on what a poltergeist is, it's gonna vary because everybody has different theories and beliefs on what a poltergeist is when it comes to the paranormal world. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah. According to Wikipedia, and I am quoting, a poltergeist, which is German for noisy ghost or noisy spirit, is a type of ghost or other supernatural entity which is responsible for physical disturbance. Unquote. Poltergeist activity is very similar to that of spirits. Both have unexplained noises and objects being moved, doors and windows opening and closing, electronics being messed with, people being touched and or scratched.
Right.
Objects appearing out of thin air or disappearing and reappearing in other rooms, etc. But the difference between them is usually in poltergeist events. Mm-hmm. Poltergeist. I will spit it out here in a second. People normally will not see an apparition or shadow figure.
Most of the time, that's what it's talked about in the cases, but sometimes they are seen.
Right. And the things occurring in the home, people believe or speculate that they are caused by a person or persons who live there who subconsciously by psychokinesis or RSPK, and when under emotional or stressful times, that somehow they create these strange events to occur around them, usually unbeknownst to them.
Right, because there's some people who believe a poltergeist encounter or what's happening is a spiritual thing, and like you said, there's other people who believe that somehow these people who are in that house or around that environment are somehow creating this from their own subconscious mind, which it's kind of hard to prove either way when it comes to this, because we don't have the best things to say this is exactly what it is. But in Tibet, they talk about the Tulpas, I think that's how you say it, Tulpas, whatever. But that's kind of similar to that of, I guess, a poltergeist in the way that you're talking about how some people believe that it's created subconsciously by some people. Well, except for in what the Tulpas is, it's basically these people, they basically are creating this. They sit there and they meditate on a thought, or they meditate on manifesting something, creating a spirit, or creating something into existence. Do you know what I'm trying to say? And
yeah.
And what they're saying is they create this, and then this entity or whatever starts to act independently of its, once it's created, and it's said to basically operate in another parallel level to our own. So we're, if this person supposedly creates this by thought, they're no longer in control of this thing's in control of itself, and now you're two separate things. And there's many people who think that spirits or aliens or Bigfoots or, all these different cryptids that are running around, they're basically like these tulupas, and that they were actually created over the centuries by all of us, sort of like you were saying with the psychokinesis theory. As far as some people think that's how poltergeists is, that's what they're saying, how all these other things are created, are actually created by our own thoughts, and they're brought into existence, But there was, when I was reading about all these different things and we were looking into finding which poltergeist case that we wanted to talk about, I came across this case, which I think we'll probably end up talking about a different day, you know what I mean? But there was this paranormal research group that was back in the 70s where they actually wanted to create their own spirit, you know what I mean? So they actually ended up documenting all their results, or what do you want to call it, create their own poltergeist or whatever. But
that's crazy.
But that's for science, they wanted to see if it was possible, But when I was reading about that, that's something that we're going to have to end up talking on a different night, because we'd already picked these two, and I had found that towards the end of the second week of our researching, you know what I mean? And remember I showed you that because they were doing all these weird tests and meditations and everything else, and they ended up starting getting results, But tonight we're going to focus on the Surrency and the Amherst case, though, So that's
personally, now I know that the human mind is a powerful thing. I don't talk about it much because sometimes it hurts, but I had a niece that whenever she would get sick, she would actually will herself.
Oh, yeah.
And until something happened that she couldn't. Mm-hmm. But it just seems to, but I know that I didn't just sit and meditate and create a Bigfoot, okay?
Well, no. You weren't even thinking about them but you didn't have to be then that manifested it. Somebody else. They say that other people created these things into existence. This is what people are saying. This is not what me and you are saying. So somebody else created it, that's why it's running around. Doesn't mean you had to create it, but it was created at some time and juncture in the past, and that's why these things are running about. That's what people are saying. I'm not saying that we're creating it, nor are we saying that's what we think. You know what I mean? I think, Spooky, you muted your mic, or I lost you. Spooky, why don't you go ahead and finish what you were saying a little bit there?
We were talking about the power of the human mind. I'm kind of thrown off because this happened. I do apologize, but it's like I said, the power of the human mind is it's an amazing thing and one of the most powerful things. But I don't think people just sitting around in a group can just manifest stuff just by thinking about it, out of thin air.
Right. And for those who missed it, at the other part before our show crashed, we were talking about how people have different theories and beliefs of what a poltergeist is. Some believe it's a spirit or ghost, where others believe it's created subconsciously through psychokinesis,
right,
or RSPK, under people who are living there or in the environment who are under like emotional or stressful times, and that somehow they created all these bizarre events to happen with objects moving or reappearing or disappearing or things like that. And then I also talked about how the Tibetan have this thing about the tulupas, where they actually have this belief system where they believe that these spirits or poltergeists are created or manifested because of or by people who sit there and meditate them into existence, which, a lot of people, like I said before we got cut off, where people think it's like, Bigfoots or cryptids or aliens or spirits are all just that they're created by us through thought over the centuries, and that's why they exist in our different realms that we have, or where they come and go or whatever. And that's not what me and you were saying, but that's what people talk about when it comes to poltergeists and things like that. And tonight we're talking about our two different cases of the Surrency and the Amherst case, and we're going to kind of leave it up to you guys to decide after hearing what our, what we end up talking about tonight. And so why don't I go ahead and just go into the Surrency family case, since we're starting a little late, since we had to figure out how to start a new
and I want to apologize to everybody too. I don't know what happened. My computer just shut down, just turned off completely.
Yeah, and then I had to end up creating another event. There's some weird. It's Poltergeist. You know.
Yeah.
I mean? The Poltergeists are messing with us. Anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and start talking about the Surrency case here. So now, the Surrency family, the one that I found, I guess it dates back into the 1870s, where this family was actually terrorized for like months by, I guess, what several newspapers claimed to be like spirits or hobgoblins or poltergeists. That's what they were talking about, what they were in these newspaper articles back then. That they were supernatural thing going on anyway. But I guess that there was over hundreds to thousands of people that were actually witness to these strange events that were occurring in their home. Now, Mr. Allen Powell Surrency was born February 7th of 1825 in Georgia, and he married his wife, who at the time was 24 years old. Her name was Wealthy, what was her name? Robertson. And in 1840...
That's quite a name, Wealthy.
It's a good luck name. But they were married in 1848. Now, both her and him, they settled in Appalachia County, Georgia. I'm a little off after everything happened, but I'll get in my groove. I know,
it threw me off too, and I do apologize.
I'll get in my groove here. But anyway, they settled in Appalachia County, Georgia in the early 1850s, which ended up being the future site of the Surrency town, which obviously is named after them. But Mr. Surrency was a prominent businessman and was known as a local civic leader and representative for his county in the General Assembly of the state. It was also mentioned at one point that he actually operated like a sawmill. He owned, I think, like the only general store in the area at that time. And they also lived and had a, operating farm as well. And people talked about their farm as being one of the finest in the country. So obviously it was a really well-to-do farm,
Right.
Had a lot of things going on. But the papers also talked about that this guy, Mr. Surrency, was actually a conductor for the Atlantic and Gulf Railroad too. So he kind of had his hand in a little bit of everything. And at the time, the community, he was really well known for being a really, good guy, and everybody liked him. So the family had no reason to make up things or to elaborate or to to put on some kind of show. They were just your typical normal family, just doing their everyday life, and he was well respected by the community and the county, you know what I mean? But
right.
The area that they lived at the time, it didn't really have a name. It wasn't called the town of Surrency. It was actually known by the railroad station number 6, because that's where the line was when they dropped off in that area. And it wasn't turned into the town of Surrency until 1904, because the Surrency family was basically the original founders of the area where they settled in first, But during 1850, the area only consisted of like the station house, like one or two places of business from what I could tell from the newspaper article, and then of course their farm. Now, this area is about 126 miles from Macon, and then it's like 60 miles from Brunswick and 90 miles southwest of Savannah, Georgia. So we kind of know where the area is now. But now I'm going to kind of go into them living there and then all the weirdness that was going on or whatever. But during 1851 to 1869, both him and his wife had like 9 children, ranging in the age of from like 1 to 19 at the time. And if I read right, there was like 4 girls and I believe 5 boys. So this is everybody who's living in the house during this time when the events were taking place. But their farm was like near the railroad, and it was surrounded by, like cypress ponds, and you have the pimento plants, and so it's kind of like woodsy and swampy-ish. So you kind of have an idea, of what it's like. There's only a couple buildings. There's no electricity. You have a railroad track right there, so the train comes by every once in a while. So you're basically out in the middle of nowhere. So you kind of have a feel of the idea of what it looks like while we're talking about this stuff. But like I said, both the Surrencys they were known to be good people. They were well-to-do citizens. They were farmers. They were good character and morals. So everyone who met them, they thought the same. Their neighbors, they had nothing but like good stuff to say about them. But the strange things started to occur in their home. I get that they can't really explain. Really started happening in like 1872, and it is when kind of like these small little events, where like something started to disappear here or there, or they heard something, started to turn into like a full blown out war in their house. Like just everything was going crazy. I almost said something I didn't want to say. But after I was kind of digging into a bunch of these, because it took me like a couple of weeks of just like researching and really looking back deep for all these multiple newspaper articles, and there was actually several of them posting in different newspapers all around even in different states, all the way up into Canada and some into Europe, all talking about the things that were occurring in at their house. And of course, like at the end of the show, I always post references so you guys can go and read it. But according to the papers, it was October of 1872 when the family started having these problems. Now, it was October 17th article that I read where Mr. Allen Surrency, which was 45 at the time, he actually sent them a letter asking them to put in what he wanted, but basically, anyway, he told them that Thursday night he had actually returned home from the city to his home, and when he got home, it was around like 9 p.m. and he found like his family, some of his neighbors, the Reverend was there, his brother was there, and several other people. I don't know them all. There was like tons of people there, at least 10 or 12 people there. And they were all like excited and nervous, and he's like, what the heck's going on? Because they were all kind of freaking out. And of course his family and his kids. So after a few minutes of him kind of being in the door, that's when he stated in the paper that a wide range of items were being tossed about in several different rooms in his residence. He said that there was other strange things that had been occurring, and he had told the paper in the next couple of days since that first night that people heard about it, and by that time, I think by the next day, over 75 or 100 people had showed up. Now, in this next newspaper article, this is where I got most of the information, and this is where I'm going to go into like the daily routine from now on, like each day, the events that happened all the way up to the end. But on Wednesday, October 23rd in 1872 in the Savannah paper, they talked about people from all over were coming to this small town of Surrency. Passengers were like hopping on the train and hoping to encounter or like experience something at the family's home. And along with all these, strangers coming from everywhere, they had several newspaper reporters who were hopping on the trains wanting to get the first, I guess, what do you want to call it, report out there, so their paper sells or whatever. But there was this guy, his name was Mr. Mason. There's another guy named Mr. Campbell, and a guy, Mr. Peter Lindstruth. Now, these were like the main reporters who have been pushing this story for the longest time that I could find when I was in the paper. But they arrived at their home that Sunday at 4 p.m. in the morning, and they made their way over to the family's home, and they knocked on the door, and one of the servants had let the newspaper men in, and they led them to this vacant room where there was like this fire burning, but it was like, almost out. And so the men sat in the room while this, the family was still sleeping. So they were, just kind of talking with each other and discussing and waiting for the, sunlight to, come about and the family to wake up so they could start asking them questions and stuff. And while they were sitting there, one of the guys went and grabbed a piece of wood and he tossed it into the fire. And he said after he, lit the fire up a little bit more, that's when they heard this really huge thud in the other room. But they didn't go and investigate at first because they just assumed it was one of the family members waking up, So he and the others just, they waited for the family to come in. But it found out later on that the family was still asleep when they first heard those noises. And that's when they found out that actually it wasn't the family. They were like these bricks that were being tossed around the house all that day. But after daylight, the family woke up, and Mr. Surrency, he met the men in the room, and he began to tell them from the start all that had taken place in their home. Now, basically what he told them is that Friday evening, right before dark, in the front room, I guess that you'd call their parlor room back then or whatever.
I think they did, yeah.
He said that when his family and his neighbors and the Reverend and they were all there, they said they were just sitting around kind of conversing, waiting for Mr. Surrency to arrive home back from the city. And they said while they were sitting there, sticks of wood were just flying into the house. They were falling from everywhere onto the floor. And in the room at the time, all the windows and the doors were closed, and nobody could figure out how or where this wood was coming from. And it was coming in multiple directions, and nobody was throwing them. It's just this wood was just whipping all over the place. So that same night, you know, these brick bats, which I basically, you know, they're like little bricks, red bricks, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
They were being tossed about. They started whipping about. They were falling from different areas in different rooms in the house as well. I'm sorry, I'm kind of like still shook up from we were trying to get the show going from before, and it wasn't working, so I'm like trying to get back on track. So I'm sorry I'm talking too fast or things aren't making a little sense. I just got to get into my groove, guys. But basically what they're saying is why they were relaxing, things were just whipping around. They had brick bats that were tossing or falling around in different rooms, and and pieces of wood were flying and stuff. And by this time, his 2 daughters were freaking out. His wife was freaking out. The minister was totally freaked out that he just, you know, ran out the front door, hopped on his horse, and took off. And he left, like, everyone behind. But everybody else decided they were going to stay awake all night long and watch to see what was causing all these things to be flying around. And the thing is, when these brick bats or these pieces of wood were whipping around, it would come so close to hitting somebody, but it never hit anybody. It would get, you know, but then it started to turn into bottles, vases, glassware were beginning to like shake, and then they would fall off of the places where they were sitting on. So every shelf or what have you, these things were just whipping off and breaking. And you know, at first people were like, okay, is there an earthquake going on or else? But it wasn't affecting any other building except for their house. So, of course, by that time, Mrs. Surrency is like totally freaked out. So she told one of the male slaves to grab the bottles that were containing the kerosene oil and to get them out of the house, which I would be too. So good thing she thought that.
Oh, yeah.
If all these things are flying about, and you got fire going, and then you got these things that are full of kerosene, you could have the whole house burned down. So the guy grabs the kerosene oil bottles and he brings them outside and he sets them out in the middle of the yard. And after placing them in the yard, one of the bottles picked up and it went flying back into the house through the front door, and it smashed into the middle of the room, and all the oil splashed everywhere. I mean, these people are sitting in a room where these things are levitating about and whipping around, and there's nothing that they can do to stop it. I mean, they're just bewildered and freaked out. And these items were it was like they were just dropping from the ceiling or dropping through, you know, thin air, and they couldn't figure it out. Which, could you imagine sitting by firelight and having all this stuff tossed about you?
I couldn't imagine it. I really couldn't, especially when the coal oil lamp comes flying back in after be sat in the middle of the yard.
It wasn't a lamp. They were bottles. The guy sat them out, and he came back inside, and the bottle came whipping back in and just splashed the oil everywhere. But it continued all night long that Friday night until Saturday daybreak. And they said the house tended to calm down by that point. But the house was totally wrecked. Their crockery was smashed. Their glassware was basically almost all shattered. There were several brick bats and billets of wood all over the floor. And that Saturday the 19th during the afternoon, it seemed like that's when the activity started to pick up again, according to the papers of what I was reading from what they were telling these reporters. Plus the reporters were there watching at different points too, seeing these things that happened. But according to Mr. Surrency, when it started up again, there were several neighbors that were in their residence who were watching this that Saturday afternoon. They witnessed seeing pitchers, you know, like the glass pitchers you pour water out of, or yes, tumblers, or books, or all these other household items started being tossed from their spout. They're talking about everyone, you know, they were all trying to investigate how it was going on. And they actually watched this pan of water slide across the table and then get picked up and then just tossed in midair. And nothing there. You know, they were talking about chairs being picked up. I mean, literally everything. You know, shoes and clothing were being taken out of, like, locked door rooms of bedrooms and reappearing in other rooms. So they were just, I don't even know how to explain. To me, it sounds like Hell House. You know what I mean? Yeah. I would have left a long time ago. But
oh, I would have too. I would have followed that preacher right out the door.
People were freaking out. They're like, because back then they're thinking, okay, this is the devil. They're witches things going on to create this, because they couldn't, how were items being taken out of locked trunks or bureau drawers or cabinets and then, reappearing in another room? Well, 8 p.m., I guess that Saturday night, they said the house started to calm down again a little bit. Now, while he was retelling the events to the reporters that had showed up, that Sunday, remember I told you it was Sunday when they showed up and he was retelling it all the way up to Saturday. Now we're into Sunday. Now, when he's sitting there with him on Sunday afternoon telling him of what happened the 2 nights before, this one reporter, who had arrived earlier that morning, while he was sitting there listening to them telling the events, he had actually looked at their clock, the Surrency's clock, and he had mentioned how their clock hands were traveling around really fast. And so everybody turned and looked at the clock, and they watched this clock move. And in their words, they, on the paper, the newspaper article reading, they said that the rate of the speed was going like 5 hours a minute. And the clock was one of those old, like, 30-hour wake clocks. And the guy that was noticing it, who was actually the newspaper reporter, he used to work for a clocksmith, or whatever you call those things. I don't know what you call those guys.
A watchmaker?
A watchmaker. Yeah, he was a watchmaker there for a while, whatever. So he, of course, got up to investigate and examine the machinery of how this clock was, and he found it to be in perfect working condition. And people thought, okay, people are using magnets and that's how they're messing with the clock, but everybody else's watches that they had were perfect. They didn't mess up. But this clock continued to spin crazy times, like something was messing with the hands, and everybody was watching it happen at the time. Now, for a while, nothing else seemed to happen during the day while the reporters were there, until around 12 o'clock when they said a pair of scissors just flew off the table to the floor, and then another brickbat flew and fell right in between 2 of the reporters' chairs. So of course, he picked it, they pick it up and they're kind of like examining this brickbat, and he handed it to Mr. Mason, the other reporter, and they said that the brickbat was kind of, extremely hot, but they tried to they both took one of each of the brickbat, and they both threw them on the ground trying to see if they could smash it, and they threw it like 2 or 3 times, and they could not break it by throwing it, so obviously this thing that's tossing the stuff around had some power to it. So he took the brickbat.
Oh, really?
So he took the brickbat and he sat it on the windowsill because he actually wanted to take it home, as a souvenir or whatever. So he sets it down on the windowsill for later on for when he leaves. And then he goes and he sits down near the front stoop. And when he was sitting there, that same, piece that he had sat in the windowsill came flying past him and flew at his feet and then broke into 2 pieces. That same thing that him and his friend kept trying to smash, that wouldn't smash, all of a sudden flew from the windowsill through the room, out the door where he was sitting, and smashed into 2 pieces. Now, that's when he decided, okay, like, I'm not going to take it. I'm just going to leave it here. We lost Spooky again. She's off Skype, but I'm going to continue on with the story here. Now, the same time, there's other things that were flying around that Sunday afternoon. There was a smooth ironing that flew from the fireplace about 6 feet into the room. And, of course, they would pick it up and keep putting it back, and they would only watch it be tossed out again and again. So, they were trying to figure out what was doing this, but there was no logic to it happening. So lunchtime's coming around, so everybody decides they're gonna sit down. So they had several guests in the family, walk out to the table, and while they were sitting there and eating, an ear of corn fell from the ceiling in between James Campbell and Mrs. Surrency. And this corn, it's almost like it just appeared in thin air above them and just whipped down, and then it just shattered, like corn all over the room or whatever. So then later that day, they were saying in the papers, they were in another room and just chilling or whatever. And then more corn would start appearing and just falling in different rooms. And one went whipping towards this woman. Her name was like Mrs. Burns, she was like this northerner lady or whatever. And it just missed her and her infant, So it's almost like this thing was taunting them like, I can hurt you, but it wouldn't hurt them. So I don't know what was with that, but it seemed like it was kind of just got off with trying to frighten them to a certain degree, but didn't end up hurting them. Now, that same day, I guess, just like moments later in the front room, this huge chamber glass was smashed into like 50 pieces into the center of the room, and several men, witnessed that at that time, and they were listed into the paper, to prove that, hey, we saw this happening, this happened, they gave their names for it, so, to prove like this is really happening. But anyway, according to the papers that Sunday, word had spread so much throughout the area, and people going on the train back and forth talking about the spirits that are going on here. By that Sunday around 3 p.m., they had over 75 people that had made their way off the train and towards the Surrency home. And the train would leave and then it'd come back like in an hour. So then the people would be there for like an hour, and then they'd hop back on the train, and then more people would be getting off the new train. So it was like this rotation of all these people coming, because how word spreads in a little town and stuff. But they said by that Sunday they had at least 300 to 400 people that had come and gone, all making their way through the Surrency home, all hoping to have an encounter, and most of all of them had witnessed something. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I don't think I could handle 300 to 400 strangers coming into my house, let alone like 10 people, and I mean, I can understand the reporters, but just letting all these strangers to come in, or I don't even know if they really wanted them all to come in, but I think they were just kind of just making their way in. But there's no way I'd want to do that. But maybe things were different back then how they are now, but I certainly wouldn't want that. But during the day, with all these people coming and going, some did have the encounter like they wanted, like I said. And according to the reporters that Sunday, they had butcher knives and pots and skillets and crockery, so it's just starting to take everything out throughout the whole house, And they said then it started leaving little piles of sugar like all over the floor. But the thing is that the family didn't have any sugar in their house, so they couldn't figure out where was this sugar coming from to be deposited there or whatever. So I'm gonna see if I can get Spooky back on Skype here. I don't know if she's back or not. Just 1 second, guys. So many things. The Poltergeists must be messing with the show tonight. Anyway, on let me switch pictures here. On Monday, October 28th of 1872, this other reporter guy was named Mr. W.C. Ramshart and J.W. Brothers, and another man named D.M. Mitchell. They were both the J.M.W. Brothers and the D.M. Mitchell. They were both agents for the Atlantic and Gulf Railroad, and they were riding along with the reporter because they wanted to come and investigate the residence as well, and to kind of debunk it, if you want to say, or whatever. Just to prove, like, hey, this is all hogwash. This isn't, these people are making it up. Because you know how some newspapers will make up things, and so they just figured, there's no way that there's 300 to 400 people that are witnessing these strange events are going on. So, of course, they're going to go down and check it out for themselves. And while, they were there, I guess, they were all waiting in one room. And while they were all waiting in one room, that's when they would hear something happen in the other room. So, of course, then everybody would get up and truck over to the other room. And then all of a sudden, they'd be in the new room. And I think we got Spooky back. Hold on, let me see if I got her. Spooky, are you there? You have to unmute your mic.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Okay. I'm glad you made it back. Okay, well, I'm talking about now we're like on Monday, October 28th, where this new reporter come in and a couple agents from the railroad wanted to come check it out too. So they're in their house, with a couple other strangers, and the activity was picking up. But the activity was happening in one room, so then everybody would run over to the one room to try to check it out, and then of course nothing's happening there, and then it would they would hear a noise in the other room. So, of course, they'd go over to the other room. So the reporter, of course, he's like, this is hogwash. You know, obviously somebody's doing this, because why isn't the activity happening in the room that we're in? So he decided, instead of bouncing back and forth between rooms with everybody else, that he was going to sit in the kitchen with Miss Surrency. Now, Miss Surrency at the time, she was busy making a meal, you know, cutting up a piece of meat on the table, and she would go back and forth between the stove and the table. And him and her were both sitting in there. Well, then all of a sudden, you know, the servant girl and some of the other family and people, they came in to the kitchen, and the servant girl was actually holding the same piece of meat. And somehow that piece of meat disappeared from the table into thin air, and then reappeared in the middle of the parlor floor. It just came out of thin air. You know, and there was no one in the kitchen at the time except for W.C. Remshart, the reporter, and Miss Surrency. And they both could not explain how that piece of meat, it was like a huge piece of meat, because they were feeding like tons of people, hundreds of people coming all the time, you know. It just vanished off the plate and reappeared into another room, you know. Are you still here?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, I didn't know if we lost.
I'm trying to catch up to you.
I didn't know if we lost you or not, but...
Every time that we do a subject
with weird
something like this,
spiritual stuff,
I have problems with my computer. For some reason, it just seems to stir things up in this house, and my computer just shut off on me again. I mean, just shut off.
Your ghostie doesn't like listening about other ghosties acting up in the 1800s.
Apparently, they're jealous.
Right. Well, when you were missing, you know, in action there a little bit, because you missed the part of the Sunday where I was telling, you know, our listeners, you know, about how during Sunday they had like 300 to 400 people that had came into their house rotating off of the train all day long. You know, I
don't know about you, but there's no way I would allow that many strangers in my house. I don't like one stranger in it.
Well, right. So, I mean, you know, and most of them all had experienced or witnessed these things that are going on. I'm not saying all 400 were in the house at one moment, but there was that much coming and going.
Property that might as well have been.
Oh, exactly. So now we're like at October 29th of 1872. I was reading this other newspaper article from the Macon Telegraph, and I'll tell you what. Macon, sorry. I'm talking a lot, you know, we've had a crazy night, you keep disappearing, but...
No, I am so sorry.
But, so I'm reading this other newspaper article, and this is a different time, okay, so there's a couple of men who were riding on the train, and they caught wind of, you know, these strange activities happening there, so like, you know what, when the train comes to, you know, station number 6, why don't we hop off and go check it out for ourselves to see what's going on? So, of course, you know, they hopped off, and they approached Mr. Surrency. I think he was at the general store at that time, whatever, and they asked him, hey, do you have any ghosts? And Mr. Surrency looked at them, and he said, why don't you just head over to my residence, and you tell me if you have any experience, you know, go see if you have any experiences. So the two men said, okay. So the two men headed off, and they walked over to the Surrency farm, and they knocked on the door. And, you know, Miss Surrency, at that time, she was 39, she answered the door, and she asked, you know, she's like, hello, and she's like, and they asked her the same question, you know, like, do you have any ghosts, you know? So, you know, like her husband, you know, she just said, well, why don't you come in and sit down for a little bit? And then she started explaining the events that took place in their house. And she told them, you know, just to come and just sit there for a while, and in a few minutes they could see for themselves if there was something going on there or not, you know? So they were sitting there, and she was kind of showing them around. She was showing them how, you know, how all the broken stuff that they had and stuff. And while they were actually talking to her, they heard this noise in the other room. So they asked her, well, what was that? She said, it's probably another brickbat being tossed. So they're like, okay. So she kind of explained to them how these brickbats are constantly being tossed about all day long that day. So of course they're curious. So they, you know, the men, they headed towards the other room. And as they approached the doorway, something goes whipping right past their heads, and it fell right behind them. So of course, you know, everybody turns their head like, you know, what the frick was that? And they see shards of this heavy barroom glass, and it was just tossed with like such force, right, that the heavy bottom of the glass just embedded deep into the floor. And like one of the men went over and he bent down and he was fighting to try to pull this thing out of the floor. I mean, it was stabbed in there really good. And then they heard this like other loud noise, and then they turned around, they found this smooth ironing, what, you know, those irons that are just, you know, like, I don't know, you know, what are those irons made of back then? Iron.
Cast iron.
Yeah, they're irons made of iron. No, but don't get smarty.
Iron, duh.
Yeah, don't get smarty. But you know what I mean? So then all of a sudden, you know, her iron is being tossed about, and they got, you know, this thing, this glass that's just stabbed into the floor, and these guys are like, okay, something's definitely going on here. So you know, they got their fill of what they wanted to see, so they're like, okay, whatever. So it said, you know, Mr. Surrency had told them, you know, because he came back to the residency, of course, he's not going to just leave his wife there with strange men, you know what I mean? And, you know, he came back to the house, and he said that evening he didn't end up falling asleep until like 3 a.m. because there was just so many things that were constantly falling around him at such a fast rate and at such force that it made it impossible to sleep, because you didn't know if you were going to be not, you know, taken out or not. But he had mentioned to all these reporters by that time they had like 2 full sets of crockery in their house that were all destroyed by some unseen thing, and they probably had like maybe 2 pieces of things that remained. That was it, you know. So this is all happening like every 5 minutes. They were saying day and night, that no one in the house ever got good sleep. That, you know, and of course those 2 men left the residence, both, you know, puzzled by what was going on. They can't explain it, but they hopped on the next train because, you know, like I said, trains go by every couple hours or whatever. So now I'm in October 29th paper I found in 1872 from the Savannah. Now the reporters from the Savannah paper, they, you know, they took the train at 7 p.m. out here, and it was hold on. Oh, I guess it was reported in the October 29th paper, but it was originally written on the evening of October 26th that they originally wrote it, but it was printed in the 29th paper, I guess. That's how I had it written down here. Anyway, they arrived there around 11:30 of that Saturday night, and they decided to kind of walk around the area to investigate the surrounding areas to see, like, what makes this place so special. Why do they have so much activity that's going on in their home? You know, so they left the train station, and they approached the Surrency house. They saw like several young men, you know, kind of standing around a fire, because these people were always coming and going. They were always outside this family's home, and they'd have like campfires going, and they'd just be sitting there all night long waiting. All these people are constantly coming and going, waiting to see stuff. So they, you know, they walk up to these young guys. They're standing around this fire. They're all joking and telling ghost stories and bantering about stuff. And so, of course, you know, those reporters, they spent the night with those guys outside conversing until the next day when the daylight hours came. And that's when they started talking to the different members of the family of the Surrency family. And, you know, of course, Mr. Surrency told these men about all the same things that he had happened to tell. Hold on a second. Are you still here, or did you lose?
Yeah, I'm still here. I was waiting to get a chance to ask if my mic sounds any better.
Your mic sounds fine.
They keep telling me to turn it up.
Let me check it out. It should be fine now because I checked. The levels should be equal. It's probably when your Skype kept going in and out that it tossed you out.
Probably.
You'll be back.
Probably.
Tonight is a night filled with poltergeist and spirit activity, I guess. I have no idea why. What's going on. I don't either. Or the weirdness. Welcome to October and Halloween, right? So anyway, these new reporters are coming, and of course Mr. Surrency's like, you know, he tells them the same stuff he's been telling everybody else, you know. But this time, these guys actually talked to their daughter. And now she began to tell her experiences to these men and how it all began for her. Okay, now she said, because remember on Friday, the October 17th is when he first started telling his. That was when he came back. Okay, so we're back of her telling her beginnings of what she started having or happening to her, okay? So it's kind of neat that I found an article with a different family member finally telling their experiences for their stuff. But anyway, it was Friday, October 17th, around 12 a.m., that the Surrency's 17-year-old daughter, Sarah Elizabeth, which I think that was Sarah Elizabeth because they said only in the paper that she was 17, and when I was checking the family records, she would be the only one that would be around that age at that time. But she, at 12 a.m., she walked out towards the train tracks to wait for, the train to arrive, because her father, like I said before, he was in the city and he was returning from Hazelhurst that night, So, of course, she went out to, to meet him, to greet him or whatever and bring him back. So while she was waiting, she was looking for the lights of the train, and this daughter, she saw like this shadowy form of a man approaching her. And wow. When I say shadowy form, I don't mean like it was a man. It was like, the shadow people type of thing, I'm talking about.
Right.
But, so, of course, she turned quickly and kind of walked towards the back of the steps. As she, reached the steps, she heard something really heavy fly past her, and it hit the ground near her. And of course, she was kind of afraid, and she didn't want to mention it to her family, so she kind of kept this quiet about, her experience before all hell broke loose in the house to herself,
Oh, yeah, until she told the reporters, of course.
Well, yeah, because that's how we got to know this. Is in the art. But anyway, she said that right. She sat down on the steps, and she looked around to see where this thing could have come from. Because the whole area where she was at, it's an open area. It's just wilderness and of course they cleared the trees where they have the train tracks, you know what I mean? But, she looked around to see where this thing could have come from. And as she sat on the steps, she said that this thing, more stuff started flying at her, but the stuff was flying from the same direction of where she saw that shadow man in the area. But she said none of the things hit her, but they kept falling all around her. So of course she's a little freaked out, which I would be too. You know what I mean? So she decided that she was just gonna go in the house at that point. She's like, you know what, Dad can find his way into the house on his own. You know what I mean? So right. So she goes inside and she's starting. She makes her way through the parlor where all those people are sitting, like I'd mentioned earlier. And she was making her way.
Now, this is her account of what happened that first night that Mr. Surrency had told earlier to the papers then, before he got home?
Right. This is everything that was happening before he got there. Because he came into the house when everybody was already freaked out, okay? So she was talking about how, like, everything was calm in the house. But before she went out to meet her father at the train, but while she was out there, strange things started to happen. So, like I said, she's in the house at this point, and, she was nervous, because whatever, there's crazy stuff going on outside, but she didn't want to tell people in the house because she didn't want them to think she was, like, silly, or she didn't want them to make fun of her. You're like, oh, you're so scared while you're waiting out, you know what I mean? Like, haha, whatever. So she said she went through the parlor into the kitchen, which that's where her mother was, preparing supper. And she said as she was going through the hallway from the parlor to the kitchen, she could hear things falling in the yard and against the house in the same direction that she was moving. Okay? So it knew where she was in the house behind the wall. Like, it was just whipping things at the wall in the same distance and, each step she took, then it would hit where she was, So that's when she said when she got into the kitchen, she could hear things, starting to go a ruckus in the kitchen, because by that time she got into the kitchen, that's when this brick bat flew, some bottles and other things started falling about, and that's when the men in the house, they called them into the kitchen. So the guys come out of the parlor, they come into the house, and that's when they started seeing all the crazy stuff, you know what I mean? And they saw no one around except for those who were already present, so there wasn't like anybody hiding outside whipping stuff or anything. I mean, everybody who was in the area was in their house, you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
But anyway, during which time, like she said, that's when pots of, their food that they were cooking or whatever, they were being whipped off the stove. The coffee pot was, picked up and they're overturned, the crockery and all that, blah, 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 was hitting everywhere. And then, of course, in the other room at the same time, this is right before the dad comes home from the train, this is everything that they were experiencing. And they were saying that the books and the glasses were all, like I said before, being tossed about. And her younger brother, he witnessed like 6 or 8 books slowly being pulled out of the shelf and then tossed to the floor. So he goes and he picks up the books and he puts them back in the shelf, and then he keeps watching these books slowly being pulled out one by one and tossed to the floor. So I don't know, I wouldn't be as brave as him. You know what I mean?
Like, he was desperate for entertainment, wasn't he?
Well, when you were like 8 and 7, you don't have...
I know, you're curious, yeah. Curiosity usually wins out.
And this is like 1870. It's not like they have TV and all other stuff. So, I mean, this is some crazy stuff going on. But, like I said, he'd pick the book up, put it back in or whatever, and it just happened several times that he called his mom over. He's hollering for his mom, like, come in here, and he showed her, how he picked the book up and put it in. So then, of course, she'd pick a book up and stick it in, and then it did it for her too. So at one point, Mr. Surrency, after all these events were happening for days and stuff, Mr. Surrency told his wife, you should just leave the home for a few days. So her and her daughter, I guess they went over to the home of Mr. Patterson, which was like a family friend, which was about 2 miles away, I guess. So the women, they planned on staying at, the Patterson's family home. I guess I just lost Spooky again. Hopefully she'll be back again. Anyway, they decided to go stay at the Patterson's family home for at least a week. But when they arrived to the Patterson home, I guess not after a long time of being in their house, I guess a few hours, that's when it was said that the same things that were happening in the Surrency home started to happen in the Patterson home. And the activity stopped at the Surrency home once the women left that residence and went to the new residence, which was Mr. Patterson's home, is when things started to go crazy there. Of course, Miss Surrency didn't want their house destroyed, by whatever was affecting them. So she decided, okay, I'm just going to leave their house and hopefully everything will stop there, because, she didn't want all their items and destroyed like all theirs was. So she left, but she left her daughter to stay at Mr. Patterson's home. And when Miss Surrency returned home just after sunset to her home is when it was said that all the activity started right up again in their home. And it was at that same time that Patterson's household went quiet and back to normal. So it seems at this point, these reporters and everybody else that they were talking about, is that it seemed that wherever Miss Surrency was present, this is what they're saying, I'm not saying if it's factual that it's her fault or whatever, like she created this, but they were saying that wherever she seemed to be, that's where the activity would occur. And, I guess they're trying to say it's like everyone believed it to be, something supernatural that was occurring, but they think that she was like the medium through which it was acting, And she stated to the reporters that she had never been memorized or hypnotized. I'm talking about she's never saw a memorist or hypnotist, as they call it. She or a spiritualist, because they had tons of people who were, into that stuff and contacting spirits and stuff back then. She was never, met one of them, she never knew any of them. She never read any books on spiritualism. She never talked about it or thought about any of that subject when it comes to the paranormal spirits or contacting them or any of this. She never knew or thought of any of this until all these people were coming to their house talking to her about the things that were occurring. That's when, or the only time that she'd ever spoke of these matters. So, because they thought she must have, did something to make this happen, but she never did. She was a good Christian woman who, was just trying to take care of her family and live her life or whatever. So the family at this point, of course, they're extremely wore out. They have basically no sleep. They basically lost all their household items. I mean, they're destroyed, and it's becoming quite costly for the family. And of course, Mr. Surrency, he's really upset, by everything that's going on, but he's also really upset by some of the papers, because at this time, there's all these different reporters who are coming and going, but there's so many different newspaper articles that are reporting on his house where they were actually exaggerating the events that were going on in their house. And they were saying some crazy stuff like pigs would appear in one room and then disappear and be outside and stuff. And he was getting mad because they were telling untruths of the events that was going on in his house. And if they're going to report it, at least report the truth or don't report it at all. And at this point he was starting to get mad, like, I'm not even going to talk to people anymore because they're making this into a huge circus. And it was causing attention, for people to come from all over the place, day and night, non-stop. So they're not getting rest from the spirits, they're not getting rest from people. They were, they're starting to pull their hair out at this point. It's just crazy. It's already been like 3 or 4 days. So, and another thing I want to mention, is with all these people coming and going, not once did the Surrency family ever accept compensation from any of these hundreds of people who were coming and going through the house. But everybody who came into their house and sat there, they fed every one of those people out of their own pocket. You know what I mean? And he took money from no one. So that just shows you the character of this man. They were a good family, and they were polite and kind to every person that came and gone to their house, even in the midst of hell of what's going on, But I came across this book. It was called The Family Storyteller, and it was by P.R. Holland. And they were actually related to the Surrency family who had this going on. And of course, I'll post the links and references so you guys can go ahead and read the book and check it out too. But in the book, they talked about the Surrency family line and a little bit about the Surrency haunting. But in the book, they tell about a time when the whole family and some of the friends were sitting down at this table for a meal. And that's when this pair of white glove-like hands appeared over the table, which they call it like white glove, but I'm assuming it's just like disembodied hands. But they say white because there's like the color see-through type of thing. I'm trying the best way they can kind of explain it at the time when they're telling the occurrences going on. But anyway, they talked about these hands appearing over the table, and these hands would move above the table, like almost like they were dancing or gliding about, right? And then all of a sudden they would stop, and they would swoop down and pick up a dish of soup, and then it just tossed it into someone's face. I don't know if it was a family member or one of the visitors. Hopefully it was one of the visitors. And Spooky's calling back. Let's see if we can get her back here.
I'm back.
Okay, great. Just a second. Let me make sure the level is back up. Hopefully you'll stay with us.
I hope so.
You're going to have to listen back to the show just to hear the things I'm talking about.
Just to know what it's about. I'm going to have to listen to it tonight.
Yes, you're missing out. But anyway, I just got done talking about how a pair of hands, disembodied hands, just hands and there's no body. It's almost like, what was that show where they had that hand? Was it called It? Or what?
Addams Family?
Yeah. All you have is some hands running around. So they have these hands that are floating about the table, above the table. And then all of a sudden it would just stop, and it picked up a bowl of soup and just tossed it into somebody's face. Now they, of course, after a while, the Surrency family ended up moving because they couldn't deal with this stuff anymore, But they still experienced these hauntings at the next place, but they weren't as bad as they were on this farm. Now, the photo that I have posted up now is in the town, and the house that's far off in the background, that's a relative's house. But in this area is where the house used to be. But, of course it's not there now. But anyway, like I said, they moved from the farm and they moved to another house. And, that house was having some activity, but nothing as near as the farmhouse was going. But the farmhouse, it stayed vacant for a very long time. Now, I did come across another paper, but this is in 1875, so this is like years later. But in this newspaper, they talked about these events happening, you know, that were similar to the Surrency family, but it was happening to this other family, to the Johnson family. And Miss Russell Johnson was her name, actually. She was from Bartow. But in their home, I guess things started happening too. Like they had the crockery and brick bats again starting to toss about in their house. And Mr. John A. McMillan, he was the son-in-law of Miss Johnson, and he had mentioned that there was so many similarities that was occurring in their house to the Surrency. Well, what happened is they actually employed one of the family's servant girls, and she had worked for the Surrency family at one point during those strange events, and now she's at this new house. So he thought that those two events in both those homes had some kind of connection. Well, of course, the connection was this girl. So he decided, I'm going to keep keep my eyes on this servant girl to make sure, what's going on. And as what he says in the paper, he stated that he caught this girl in the act of tossing one of those bricks into the middle of the room. So, of course, he confronted her, and she admitted to being the cause of the events that took place in their home, in the Johnson home. And, of course, she was discharged of her services, and, I don't know, they sent her off somewhere else. Anyway, so many think that it might have been possible that maybe she was part of what could have been occurring in the Surrency home, but she couldn't have been for everything. But they're saying that because it happened in their home, therefore that's the answer of everything that was happening in the Surrency's home. But there was too many strange things that were going on in the Surrency's home that there's no way it could all be blamed on her. I mean, maybe she could have participated in something, like maybe she might have tossed something here or there, but there's no way she could have tossed items through a closed door, these closed windows. All these things were floating through the mid-air in front of people's eyes, and how could she make the clock go crazy in front of all these reporters? She was, and how can she create these floating hands to appear, etc., etc.? You know what I'm trying to say? All these things I was talking about. This girl wasn't there. She couldn't create half of these things that were happening in hundreds of people's witness to these things. So, is it possible that she was just used as an excuse to, solve this strange events and bring attention to this other family who wanted to be known as the ones who solved the Surrency mystery? Maybe so. But, she probably decided she wanted to bring a little action to the new house, so she thought, why not? I'll make some little crazy stuff go on here, but there's no way that she was the source of everything that happened in the Surrency home. And there's too many people who put their names in the newspaper to, because your name is like your word. Like back then, it's like serious, not like how it is nowadays. Like people just want to be famous. They'll say and do anything. So there's just too many people who witnessed this. Several reporters as well. You know what I mean? So these people just wanted to be famous and get their name in the paper and say, yeah, we solved this. This is what it was. But it's not. But Alan Surrency, the owner of the farm, he died January 7th of 1877 in Surrency, Georgia. And they buried him over in the Overstreet Cemetery. Now, like I said before, the abandoned Surrency residence, it sat there for a while until it burnt down in 1925. And people still tend to visit this area. And when they're in the area, they claim to have odd things that still happen from time to time. True or not, I mean, I don't know, because I'm not there. I'm just reporting I'm not even a reporter. I'm just telling a story here of what's been said to have occurred by all these people who witnessed this stuff. But like they're saying, there's still some kind of strange activity that's occurring there. But it seems that, the Surrency family, they're not like the only ones in the area that had strange encounters, I guess, because when I was reading different sites and articles and stuff that I had read, that in the town, years on after Mr. Surrency had died or whatever, that people are having run-ins with apparitions, ball of light. And as far as the ball of light goes, it's weird because it's always on or around the tracks. And these things, this light just will appear, and many people have seen it, and then it's almost like it's heading towards them, and then it'll disappear, and then reappear past them, like it goes around them somehow, and then reappears and then keeps going down the same path or pattern or whatever. And some think like, oh, it's caused by a man that was murdered there that used to work for the train or whatever. But everybody has like their theories of what causes something, I don't know. But they also have this thing that's called the Surrency bright spot, where these scientists, or geologists or whatever you want to call them, they were like mapping the Earth mantle, and they actually discovered something that they called the bright spot under. Oh, we got Spooky back, I think. Hold on. Are you back, Spooky?
I'm back. Just go on. If I say anything right now, we're going to get censored.
Okay. Well, I'd be the censor. We're YouTube. But anyway, like I was saying, these geologists, when they were mapping the Earth mantle, they kind of found something that they called the bright spot under Surrency. And what it is it's this large spot, which is like from their machines that they're penetrating through the ground, and it shows up as this like really bright thing. But it's 2 miles in diameter, and it's kind of like shaped like a contact lens, like circular shape, I'm trying to say. And they're saying it could possibly be some kind of subterranean pool of water or some kind of other fluid, which they say is like 9 miles down. And they say it couldn't be, liquid over, because from what we're taught is that because of the heat and pressure at those depths, there's no fluids that could ever exist. So what this bright spot is, I guess it shows differently than what science has been teaching us, is what they're saying. Now, many think that this is maybe the cause of all this strange things that are happening in the area, in the town of Surrency, is because of that thing that's 9 miles under the earth. Now, they're also talking about how this goes into the whole hollow earth, of course. That's kind of brought up by all these conspiracists and blah, blah, blah. But that's totally for like another show topic. But anyway,
yeah.
There's many who think this was the stuff that's happening here in the town, and that the Surrency stuff is an intelligent haunting that took place there. While there's others who say it leans more towards the poltergeist, and in the poltergeist, and those who think that that's created by people subconsciously, making these events to happen, and it's only because they kind of think that because no one really spoke of seeing an apparition except for the daughter who saw that shadowy figure while she was.
Well, let me ask you something, because and I don't mean to interrupt you, but of course I missed it. What did they come up with? Was there a tragedy that happened on this land? Did somebody die in the house?
No.
Does anybody know why? Because what I did catch of it, it sounded like that whatever this was following around. What was her name? Sarah Elizabeth?
No, the mom, Miss Surrency. The reporters were speculating or putting into the paper saying maybe it was her that was creating this. Not so much her, but they asked her, did you go to a they called them, I already forgot what the heck they're, like a hypnotist. Was she ever hypnotized, or did she ever, try to contact the dead, or blah, blah, blah. And she's like, no, I never did that, whatever. Because it seemed like wherever she was at, activity was occurring, okay?
Okay.
So they were thinking, like, maybe it had something to do with her. Maybe there was something attached to her. Maybe she opened up a door, or whatever. But she was like, no way, I didn't do anything but be normal, you know what I mean? So, right. If that's what you're asking, yeah, I did talk about that earlier. But, like I was saying, there was, besides the Surrency home, like I said, there's other activity that seems to be occurring in the town. And then there are people seeing apparitions there, and they're experiencing this ball of light. And then I was talking about how the geologists have found this strange thing 9 miles below Surrency. And you guys can look this up, and I'll have it in the in our podcast references, so you can go and read about it. But it's called the Bright Spot, And some think like maybe whatever that is down there could be creating all the strangeness that's going on in this area. Okay?
Well, not only that, though.
Mm-hmm.
This happened in what, like 1872, something like that?
Well, for a while.
The area it's in, Macon, Savannah, all of those places, those are areas where the Civil War took place.
Mm-hmm.
Could it have been maybe a residual from that?
I don't know.
Or something left on the land because of that?
They founded this area, you know, they were the ones, besides the railroad track being there, but there was something like I read about...
They founded the area, that means that they moved there. But that doesn't mean that some sort of battle didn't take place through there or something.
I didn't see anything about that in all the stuff that I read.
Okay.
So, I guess if somebody listening tonight or somebody who listens in the future podcast, if you happen to come across that information, feel free to contact us at anythingbutordinary2.wix.com, anything but ordinary, and answer Spooky's question. Right?
It was just an idea.
But okay, so what I was talking about now, you know, people are experiences, and I thought, well, maybe this weird thing that's 9 miles down could have caused it. But like I'm saying, there's some people who are lenient towards this being intelligent haunting, where there's some who say it's the poltergeist, meaning that the family or somebody in that household created these events to happen because they didn't see any apparitions, except for, like I said, the daughter who saw that shadowy figure outside while she was waiting for her dad. And then also you have the pair of hands that were seen floating above the table, you know. And in one of the papers it said that they never heard disembodied voices. It never talked about, you know, them trying to contact the dead or any of that stuff, okay? But then there's those some papers that came on later on that they were trying to sensationalize and like, oh, all the, you know, because you can read all these websites nowadays where they talk about pigs being in the house and then zapping through the walls and all this crazy stuff. But of course, I didn't want to just go off of the nowadays sites. That's why I went back to try to get close to the source. And that's when I'm like, okay, I'm leaving out the BS stuff and try to stick to at least what was being said back then. Okay? But, I've been talking so much, my throat's getting dry from my cold. But, like I said, they never once talked about hearing voices or anything like that. And then when the women went over to their friend's place, you know, like I said, you know, the activity stopped in their house and started up at the friends. And like, and like, you know, when I said when the mother went back home on her own, that's when the activity switched back to their place. And like I said, some think it was like you're, you know, saying that it was possibly like one of the younger females causing the poltergeist type of activity due to, you know, like their puberty age thing, you know, because they always talk about that stuff, you know what I'm talking about?
Well, that's true because, you know, it's like I told you before the show, or yesterday, I think it was when we were talking about it, that most of the things that I read, they usually center around adolescents, especially females.
Right. Well, all I know is that this Surrency events was highly publicized, and they had hundreds to thousands of people that flocked to the number 6 station in hopes to see and or explain away these bizarre events that took place. You had curious seekers to reporters from people who came all over, you know, as far as Canada, you know, Canada or Europe. But, you know, whatever may have been, you know, I don't know. We don't know what caused this. And to this day, people still don't know what actually caused all this. You know?
Right.
You don't know if it's these people, like, you know, the woman somehow created this poltergeist type of effect, or if they had these entities or demons or what have you. All we know is that this weirdness happened and it occurred for a good while, and then it was witnessed by tons of people and several reporters. So that's all I have. And I thought this, I thought, man, this is just too good. I have to talk about it. It doesn't matter if a case happens back in the 1800s or if it happened yesterday. I mean, this is one of those things that it's just so bizarre. You have to talk about it. And I was so happy that they had so many different articles to actually read about it and not just go off of, you know, every website that everybody regurgitates the same thing. And I wanted to find a photo of the family, and I couldn't find any. I did find their headstones, you know, and I did, you know, locate the area of where the house was, which is that kind of like that field there by the railroad line. But, you know, I even went on that, you know, those family genealogy sites and stuff, and they didn't have any photos up there either. Of course, they have family photos of the other younger, you know, now closer to our generation, but not as far as back then.
They usually do.
And maybe they didn't have photos of back then of them. There was a photo floating about of this family standing in front of an old house that was on several websites where people said, "Oh, this is the Surrency family," but I'm like, I can't prove if that was their family or their house. You know, somebody could have just put it up and claimed it was. So I wasn't going to use it for tonight's episode. But do you want to try to go into your case or whatever?
Yeah, I'll go right into it because maybe I can get through it.
Yeah.
Okay, but it's like I said before, you know, according to most of the things I've read about them, they usually center around adolescents, you know, especially females. And such was the case of Esther Cox, who lived in Amherst, Nova Scotia. This is one of the more famous accounts of poltergeist activity because it was witnessed by so many people as the Surrency family. And this one was also well documented. 18-year-old Esther lived in a house with her brother, 2 sisters, Jenny and Olive. Olive was married to Daniel Teed. He lived there too. They had 2 children who also lived in the house, along with Daniel's brother John. That's a lot of people in that house. At different times, they would also rent out rooms for extra money. Now, in August of 1878, Esther was the victim of an attempted rape that left her with minor bruises and scratches, but it also left her with deep mental scarring. And this was with her for the rest of her life. And this was also when the strange activity in the house began. Now, not long after the attack, Esther started to develop these fevers and seizures. And they would just come on suddenly, which was strange because Esther had always been very healthy. Now, Esther and Jenny shared a bed, and one night after they had gone to bed, Olive and Daniel were in the living room, and they heard the girls let out this blood-curdling scream. So they ran into their bedroom and they found the girls cowering in a corner. Now they claimed that something was moving underneath the blankets. So Daniel, thinking that it must have been a mouse, searched the bed, but he found absolutely nothing. The next night, the same thing happened, and this time when Olive and Daniel went into the room, there was this box in the middle of the floor, and all of its contents were thrown out, and there was this strange noise coming from the box. Now, Esther said that they had had a noise under the bed, and when she reached under the bed, which I would have never done, the box jumped out into the middle of the room, then it jumped again, and all the stuff spilled out onto the floor.
Uh-huh.
Now, the third night, Esther went to bed early because she was not feeling well. Well, hours later, Jenny went to bed, and just minutes later, Esther jumped out of bed, screaming. She stood in the middle of the room. Her eyes were wide, her skin was swollen and hot. And Esther was crying, and she screamed, "I'm dying. Why is this happening to me?" And then immediately she fell to the floor in convulsions. And
wow.
This is how Olive and Daniel found her when they came into the room. Now, while they were trying to help her, they heard these 4 extremely loud claps that shook the entire house. I mean, it rattled the windows, it rattled stuff on the shelves, it just shook all through the house. And everybody, of course, stood frozen because they were all scared. And as soon as these loud claps stopped, Esther stopped convulsing. Her skin returned to its natural color, and the swelling went away. And then she just fell into this very, very deep sleep. Well, she stayed in bed for the next 3 days, trying to recuperate. And during these days that she stayed in bed, nothing happened. Everything in the house was just peaceful. The fourth night, the same thing happened, including these extremely loud, thunderous claps. So Olive and Daniel, by this time they knew that they had to do something. So they called in a trusted doctor. I think his name was Dr. Carete. And he documented everything in a journal from the time he walked into that house until the time he left it. Now, this doctor, he, when anything would happen, he would look around for what he would call trickery. So he wrote, like I said, he wrote everything in his journal. Also the fact that he could find absolutely no reason for all these things that he was witnessing. And he saw a lot too. He saw things flying off of shelves, furniture moving, everything. And on the first night, Esther was laying on her back and she had her hands in plain sight. And her pillow was just jerked out from underneath her head like somebody had just grabbed it and just pulled it out. And throughout the night, the activity just got more intense. I mean, there was loud banging coming from underneath the bed. So this doctor got down on the floor and he looked around underneath the bed and he found absolutely nothing. And then a few minutes later, he said he wrote in his journal that he heard something like metal scratching on plaster. And a few feet above Esther's bed, on a plastered wall, he said that he witnessed letters appearing on the wall. And the letters spelled out, they were all together like one long word. But he wrote in his journal that the letters were, Esther Cox, you are mine.
So was she on the bed at the time, like resting?
He said that she was laying on the bed and her hands were in full sight.
Well,
like her hands were laying across
obviously
her.
You would see somebody stand on the bed and start scribbling the wall.
Exactly.
But he said each letter started to form in his eye, in his sight line, and he was watching it spell out, Esther Cox is mine.
Right. Wow. It's Esther Cox, you are mine. He said that he heard the scratching, and when he looked up to where he thought the scratching was coming from, these letters just started forming on, scratches in the wall. Mm-hmm. Now, during all of this, like I said, he wrote in his journal that Esther never moved.
Like she was in coma, was she sleeping or?
She was in this real deep sleep.
Okay.
And she was trying to recuperate from,
being slapped
a couple nights before.
Yeah. I said, no, you don't. We shouldn't laugh. We shouldn't laugh because, tonight you're going to go to bed and this thing's going to slap you around. I guess he's already
He's already messed with my computer.
Yeah. Oh, keep talking quick before anything else happens.
But, I mean, you would think that this would be enough to scare anybody off and that they wouldn't come back. Not this guy. I mean, he returned the next day. Mm-hmm. And according to his journal, so did the activity. He said potatoes came flying across the room, small fires erupted, in different places in the house. And he heard those tremendous claps. Mm-hmm. And he thought that the claps were coming from the roof. But during the next several days, he also noted that knives would come flying across the room and stick into the wall. Lit matches just appeared out of nowhere and fall onto the bed and furniture.
So this thing was a pyro.
Yeah. He was an arsonist.
Yeah.
And he said that
Not
furniture...
today. I'd grab a freaking fire extinguisher and put that thing out. But like, dude,
I hear you. He said that furniture would move or appeared to be picked up and just thrown about the room.
Yeah.
These drawers would come flying out of dressers and slam against the wall. And it was at this point that the activity actually became life-threatening for Esther. Because they were being thrown at her.
Oh.
And people would claim to hearing heavy slaps, and then within seconds, Esther's face would turn red and these welts would appear on her face. So now, whatever this poltergeist was, it was physically and brutally attacking her.
Wow.
So Esther decided to move out, if only for a short time. So she went to stay with another sister who was miles away.
Yeah, to try to escape this thing that was tormenting her.
Exactly. But while she was gone, nothing happened at either house. It was as if this thing had left as fast as it, had came. Because, because when the activity had stopped, Esther decided she wasn't in the house. And pretty soon she decided she was going to go back to Amherst.
Okay.
And this was like 3 or 4 weeks later.
Oh, so she was staying at this other place, her other sisters, for at least 4 weeks. And from what
she
you
stayed
read, there was no activity
there at least a month.
So no activity took place there when she was at the other house.
During this month that she was gone from Amherst, absolutely nothing happened in that house. Nothing. Everything was peaceful. The family, was just going on with their lives for this next month. Well, when she went home, that Sunday, she went to church. Esther was a devoted Catholic. And so she went to Mass. Thank you. I couldn't think of what that was. But anyway,
she was in
during
church.
Mass. Yeah, she was in church. I'm sorry. This whole
Tonight's
thing with my
got us
computer's
all
just
crazy. Yeah. Anyway, go on.
It's just got me boggled here a little. Okay, so she went to church, and during math.
It's Mass.
During Mass,
yeah,
these loud knocks started interrupting the service. Now, the priest tried to carry on with the sermon, and so he started to talk a little louder, but the louder he talked, the louder the noise got. Now, by this time, though, everyone had heard about what was going on at the Teed house, and they began to look at Esther, who became very embarrassed, and I don't blame her, really. So she decided that she was going to quietly get up and leave, and when she did, the noise stopped and the service returned to normal. Now, in the meantime, after all of this...
That's one way to get out of church. No.
Yeah, really.
Sorry, God. Anyway, go on. In the meantime...
Yeah, sorry, Lord. But in the meantime, the events continued, at the Teed house, but they became more dangerous. Like one day, a young neighbor went to the Teed house just to hang out. And this was somebody they knew.
Who's going to go hang out there after you know all the crazy things going on?
Well, he was a neighbor.
Okay.
He'd known this family for a while.
Yeah.
He's just a young guy that every once in a while he'd go over there and hang out. Yeah, he was a friend. Well, he was playing with a pocket knife. And all of a sudden, the pocket knife was ripped out of his hands, and it was embedded in Esther's back, all the way to the hilt.
What? So his pocket knife got ripped out of his hand, and it was whipped in the back of her spine?
Yeah, she was walking by, and had her back to the guy, and I didn't say to the spine, it was to the hilt. It was one of those pocket knives. I think they call them hinge knives back then.
Okay, but I'm just picturing it in my head. That's all.
Yeah. Like I said, now it's becoming life-threatening. Now, as I said before, the entire village of Amherst had heard about Esther and the poltergeist. And
how do you know that neighbor just wasn't a jerk and whipped the knife in her back?
Well, I don't know. But he claims it was just ripped out of his hand. And the next thing he knew, it was sticking in Esther's back. And it didn't say anything else about who was standing there with him.
Come on, if you were her, you would have turned around and punched that guy in the face, thinking it was him.
I would have done more.
Yeah.
But anyway, like I said, the entire village of Amherst had heard about Esther and this poltergeist. So a lot of them came around just to see for themselves. And they saw plenty. Some even tried to communicate with it by the method called rapping, 1 time for yes, 2 times for no.
Right.
Now, some of the people would sympathize with her. There were mixed emotions over this. Some of the people would sympathize with her. Some were just curious, but there were others who said that Esther was doing all of this to herself. Now, sometime during these events, Esther came down with diphtheria. So she was sent to Sackville in New Brunswick to rest.
Mm-hmm.
During this time, nothing happened. And this was one of the reasons, why everybody thought she was doing it to herself, because every time Esther would leave, the house would become peaceful and normal again. But when she came back, then it would all start again. So Esther, by this time, claimed that she was being haunted by 6 different ghosts. In fact, she claimed that she had seen and communicated with 3 of them and had learned their names. And I think it was like Bob Nichols.
Bob Nichol was one.
Bob Nichol, yeah, who said that, who she said was a shoemaker in life. There was a relative there. She claimed that his name was Peter Cox. And then there was a Maggie Fisher. Now, these were the ghosts that were supposedly haunting her. Now, I could find no... Anyway. Yeah, 3 of them anyway. And I could find, and I tried, I could find no information on these names.
Mm-hmm.
In the summer of 1879, there was this man by the name of Walter Hubble. He rented one of the rooms from the Teagues. Now, this man had heard about all of this, and he was not just a stranger passing through town and needed a place to stay. He heard about Esther and all these strange events taking place. So he became...
Esther is the one that's haunted, not the house.
Right.
Okay.
And like I said, he had heard about her, and he became curious to the point that he was almost obsessed with this.
Mm-hmm.
He documented everything he had seen, and he claimed in his journal that Esther was in plain sight when these events took place, and that Esther could not possibly be the one causing them or creating a hoax, which a lot of people thought she was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And he stayed there quite a while, and he observed everything that he could. He even claimed he had communicated with the ghost, and he supposedly learned the name of the other 3 ghosts haunting Esther. And I think it was like a Mary Fisher, a Jane Nichol, and Eliza McNeil. Now, I could not find anything out about these names either.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked. As a matter of fact, I wasted a lot of time on those names for some reason.
That's the point. That's our point, to try to dig further than most sites, to try to validate or disprove. And that's what we do, so.
Exactly.
While we're storytelling this stuff. So.
And Hubble wrote in his journal that he witnessed glasses being thrown, loud noises, those extremely loud claps that shook the house, furniture being tossed just out of nowhere, and the thing of it was, when the furniture was being tossed, when he saw it, it was off in another room where there was absolutely nobody there. And eventually, this Hubble, he wrote a book all about this, and it's titled The Great Amherst Mystery. And he even included in the book 16 affidavits from witnesses just to prove that what he had seen was real, that his book was not a fake, or, as they said back then, trickery. And then, and there were some that said he only moved in to profit from Esther's misery, which that could have been part of it, who knows. But he did talk Esther into doing a tour and talking about all these events, but on the first speaking engagement, she was met with so much hostility, and they literally threw things at her that she just refused to continue with the tour. And he was charging admission too. So I think that
he's
part of that
money
was
off her.
He was making money off of this woman's misery.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Is what he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. So eventually she became tired of the attacks and how miserable her life had become. And the attacks were becoming more violent, and the reaction of the local people really became unpleasant. I'm also guessing that she was also having guilt for these events, that was taking place in her sister's house.
Well, yeah.
And the attention that it was causing. But, whatever the reason, she took a job with a family friend, a farmer named Arthur Davidson. But this is the first time the poltergeist actually followed her. and Mr. Davison's barn mysteriously caught fire and burned to the ground. Now, he believed that Esther had set his barn on fire and deliberately burned it. So he had her arrested. And she was actually convicted of arson. And she was sentenced to 4 months in prison, but she only served, and she only served a month of it.
Who cares? She's going through hell in a handbasket, and then they decide, let's put her in jail, you know.
Well, he was a family friend. You would have thought that he'd have heard about all of this stuff.
Yeah, but he probably didn't believe it and thought she was just creating all of this to happen for attention, I suppose. But, you know, his whole barn burnt down. That's a big chunk of your money, too, so I guess he was
especially
angry.
For a farmer, especially back then.
Yeah, but this poor woman.
I know. But anyway, now, I didn't find out why she only served such a short time. And there is no mention if this poltergeist followed her into prison. Okay? But I can only guess that that back then they really didn't sentence women too much unless they really committed a horrendous crime like murder, something like that, you know. Mm-hmm. They didn't really send women to jail.
There was a few.
There were a few. Of course, there were a few.
Serial killers we talked about from the 1800s.
Well, that's true, too, but that's more horrendous than burning a barn.
Right. I don't think she burned the barn, though.
I don't think she burnt the barn either, but, you know, but I'm guessing, you know, it was just, she was just sent to prison, she just served a short time just because she was a woman.
Mm-hmm. Anyway.
But this is an interesting part. When Esther came out of prison, there was nothing. The poltergeist had left. Huh. There were no more attacks. There was nothing being thrown around. There were no strange noises. Absolutely nothing. It left and never returned. Mm-hmm. Now, Esther moved to Brockton, Massachusetts, and she lived a normal life. What could be normal for her. Yeah. She actually married twice, and she had a son by each husband, and by all accounts, she regained her life until her death on November 8th, 1912, at the age of 53. Now, I don't know much about poltergeists, and during my investigations, I have encountered noisy spirits, and I've even been pushed and slapped.
Yeah, what's that place was, what's that? I remember what place we were talking about. They pushed you downstairs. That was awful.
Oh, yeah.
You were laid up in bed for a while because of that.
Yeah, I was, because I went down, I think it was 2.5 flights of stairs. Mm-hmm. But most of what I've read and the documentaries that I have watched, mm-hmm. they seem to be centered around one person in particular. So, you know, it's like, what caused these attacks on Esther?
Well, she said what happened. She said that there were 6 spirits that were...
Right, she was being haunted by 6 spirits that just seemed to have come out of nowhere, and they were all centered around her. Mm-hmm. Nothing happened to anybody else in the family. This was all directed at her. You know, I mean, could they have been brought on by the attempted rape? That was something that, like I said, that left deep mental and emotional scars on her throughout her life. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if maybe this brought her so much trauma and guilt, because you have to remember the era that this took place. This was a time, and do not get me wrong, rape is traumatic no matter what era it happens in. But back then, the women were blamed for it.
They still are today.
Well, yeah, they are.
You were dressed like
through
that.
The 70s and 80s, you know.
Bar, you shouldn't have done. It's always the victim's fault.
I know.
And it's not just women that are raped. Men are raped too. But you know, and they don't talk about it because they don't want to be put down for it. But it happens.
I know, but the shame and the guilt of it was placed on her. And mm-hmm. you know, I remember once, I think it was in the 80s, a girl I knew was attacked and raped. And the first question that she was asked was, what were you wearing? Mm-hmm. What does that have to do with it, you know? And so this is back in a time when, you know, men pretty much got away with.
Anyway, so
yeah, but
you're
know, like I
thinking
said,
that because of that, that could have created some type of negative energy to manifest around her.
Yeah.
Or because of that negative act, some negative things could have attached themselves to her.
Right.
From this man who could have had
theory.
his own, he could have had his own spirit attachments, and when he was doing these acts, some of them decided to latch on to her. Now, like you were saying, you know, she went to prison or jail, whatever, and then when she came back, it was gone. And somebody had mentioned, like, maybe these things decided to stay there, and they latched onto somebody else,
entirely possible,
and decided to torment them in prison. I mean, that's darkness's whole goal anyway, is to destroy everything.
And like I said, you know, the shame and the guilt was put on her, and she was severely mentally scarred by it. So was it to the point that she brought so much negative energy to herself that it was her way of punishing herself? No, I don't believe that. But that's just one theory. And as silly as it sounds, this is actually one of the theories out there, because this poltergeist only attacked her while it was scaring the others in the home, and it was clearly making their lives almost as miserable. Esther was the only one hurt during this.
Physically
or
hurt,
did it just not like her?
I don't know.
You know?
Maybe it decided that she was the weakest one.
Could have been.
And had the ability to torment her the most. Maybe it could break her down the most, that it could penetrate her mind and really feed off of her energy. I don't know. Right. Me and you are not experts by any means, nor do we ever claim to be experts in anything. We're just two friends that find interests in many things and share it with others and banter with people back and forth in the chat and everything else, you know, but right. It's hard to say what or why this occurred to her at that time. But I did, you know, I was helping you look up photos and stuff, and I did happen to find the gravestones of her sister and her husband, Teed, you know what I mean? But I couldn't find her grave.
I couldn't find her grave anywhere. I don't know where the woman is buried. Or what? I looked. I couldn't really find what her last name
would have been by which husband, because it.
Yeah, I know, and that was something else too.
The family genealogy.
Her husband's names were not mentioned.
It was almost like she was kept out of the family line, because they had all the different families in the. You know, when people are mapping the tree out, it seemed like she wasn't even talked about. So was she an embarrassment to this family? So they decided, let's not even put her in. And like
I said, out of all the people in this house, and there were a lot of them, why was she the only one that it chose to attack? You know, was it the house? Was it built with materials that held negative energy? This can happen, and it does, even today. You know, but again, it only attacked Esther, so this theory just doesn't fit, because if that was the case, it seems to me it would have attacked everyone in the house. And here's another one, and this one here I find so stupid. I really do. Some claim that, well, it was because Esther was hormonal. She was 18 years old. Now, I know that's another dumb theory, and in my opinion, it's really stupid. But some people say that these poltergeists attack young girls that are hormonal. Well, Esther was 18 years old.
Boys? Should she have been through that? When the males are just as hormonal, like going through their hormone and crazy sex crazed too stuff. So I guess only women create. That's stupid.
Only women get badly hormonal. I don't know.
No, create these things because they're that age and they are PMSing, so therefore they create poltergeist activity. Whatever. Anyway,
I have no idea. You think a guy going through puberty would attract one?
I'm laughing about what you almost said, but anyway.
I know.
'Cause
almost, but not quite.
Yeah. Anyway.
And there was another one. You know, did Esther have some sort of psychic ability? You know, spirits seem to know who can see them or sense them and even communicate with them. I mean, I walked into several places that have been swamped by spirits to the point I had a hard time of breathing and had to leave. I don't I don't think anyone knows really why these poltergeists choose one person to attack, or two or three, you know. And I don't think anyone really will ever know, but it seems to be what they do. At least from my research and what I was reading on this. And some of the theories, which I thought were just absolutely stupid.
Yeah. It just, this case, both of these are intense. And the fact that there's so many people that were witness to these. And I just feel bad for, okay, for the Surrency home, nobody was really hurt except for the person who had the soup whipped in their face. Okay, that sucky. Okay, but other than that, they were just scared, you know, but nobody was ever really physically harmed. Whereas in this case, this woman was tormented for, who knows, she could have been tormented to the day she died. We just don't know because it was never continued. There was nothing about it. Well, there might have.
There really wasn't much about her when she came out of prison, except for the fact that she was married twice, and she outlived both husbands. Mm-hmm. It never said what her married name was. Never said the name of her sons, and you know, I mean, I spent a lot of time just trying to find that.
Yeah. It's interesting anyway. I don't know if you had anything else to say on it or whatnot.
No, that's pretty much it. I'm thankful that I got through it without getting kicked off again.
Yeah. We want to apologize to everybody for, we don't know what happened. Obviously, I guess the spirits decided, like, hey, the show's about a poltergeist, it's about strange shit, let's just mess with Spooky's computer and whatnot. And so we apologize that, you know, we lost the first event and had it, but at least we were able to create another one. And, you know, I was telling my, case first. So luckily I could have kept going while you were popping in and out. And I'm glad that, you finally were able to stay and be able to tell the show that you or the topic, you know, that you got to look for everybody. So, Spooky, why don't you let everybody know what we're going to be doing next? It's kind of different because we're actually going to be doing something again this week.
Okay, Friday, the 27th, from 4 to 6 p.m. Central or 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern, we're going to be on Paranormal Soup Spookathon with Jason Bland.
Yeah, it's not just Paranormal Soup. It's Paranormal Soup, and I think it's LMV.
Paranormal Soup, LNM, Spookathon.
Yeah. And we're going to be on there for a couple
Jason's
hours.
a nice guy. I like the show, and I'm looking forward to being on his show, and we are going to post a link to it.
Well, wait. It's going to be on haunted locations. We're going to be talking with Jason, and like each one of us, or Jason, you, and me, are going to pick 5 different locations, kind of like a forest, a haunted forest, castle, a house, you know, a little variety, and you know, continue on with the little Halloween-ish theme. So hopefully you guys can, we'll be posting it on our Facebook page, Anything But Ordinary, the link there. We'll also post it on our website. So you guys can go, hopefully pop in and
we hope you pop into the show and pop into his show on Sunday nights.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Paranormal Soup. Like I said, we will be posting a link on our page.
And it's from 4 to 6 Central Time. And it's just...
4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern.
Yep. Go ahead.
And I'm looking forward to doing the show. Jason Bland's a nice guy, and I like his show when I can get in to listen to it. I want to thank our mods, Richard, Penny, Vamp, and Nail. Nail.
Yeah. Well, I don't think Penny made it in tonight, did she? Maybe.
Yeah, she was in there.
Oh, cool.
And I want to thank Raven for a good show, what I heard of it anyway.
Or keeping it going.
For keeping it going, absolutely. Yeah. She did a great job at keeping it going. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties on my end. We do not have a topic for the next show yet, and we will be posting one in the next couple days.
Yep.
Thank you for coming. Please subscribe to us, give us a like, and please share us with others on any social media site you may be a part of. And don't forget to come in Friday night. We'll post the link. And on Sunday nights, Paranormal Soup with Jason Bland.
Well, and also with our shows, we're still going to continue doing them every other week. We're not going to do them weekly yet because we still have a lot going on, and I'm still sick. I'm trying to recover. But I just want to say thank you all for coming. Thank you for transferring over to the new event. And, thank you for sharing the new link with others. And hopefully we'll see you guys at our other shows. If you guys want to get a show reminder, you can always click here on the YouTube next to our Spooky&Raven name. Or, to get a show reminder when we go live. Or you can go to, our website, anythingbutordinary2.wix.com/anythingbutordinary. And you can sign up for weekly email, well, not weekly now, but soon to be weekly email reminders. Or you can also just contact us there if you want to talk to us. Or if you want to come on the show and share your own, encounters, photos,
Absolutely.
EVPs or whatever. Or you can make a show suggestion if you want. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you around at the other shows, and hopefully we'll see you Friday over at Jason's show. Good night.
Good night.